you've built a property portfolio, brings you a nice piece of income. You've got a bachelor's, you've got a master's, and you're consistently driving for more. Why?
I think, just sort of still continue a little bit with the masters, I think with that, it was a challenge, and I think I like a challenge. And I honestly just signed up for it thinking, all right, so I've not written an essay, and the thing is, I probably never ever wrote an essay. I was always someone, and this is typical sort of dyslexic behaviour, I'd sort of skirt around it. Even when I did my first degree, I'd write captions like, this is why I did this, and it'd really need to be like an essay, and they'd be like, oh, you need to expand on that more, and I'd be like, oh yeah, and I kind of managed to get around it, and that's why I didn't do very well in my first degree. But this time I was like, okay, and that was the challenge. So I had to really actually apply myself and really find the ways to kind of learn. So what I think I don't really know what it is. I can't say there's one thing that sort of keeps on like driving me forward, but I don't think I know any other way to be. Like, I think that's just integral to who I am now. I think I'm always going to do. I'm always going to be a doer. So I'll always be, like, sometimes I'm sitting down and I think, oh yeah, I'd like to learn French. And I think, oh, I'll do that like in 5 years. And I probably might, because I just think sometimes I think of something, and once the seed's planted, it might not happen like immediately, but it will happen at some point.
Has there ever been anyone that's told you can't do something?
Oh yeah, all the time. You shouldn't tell me that. That's terrible. Because when they say you can't, I'm like, oh yeah, that means you just don't know the way. There's another way to do it.
That's what drives me.
Yeah. Like, I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I've had a lot of people say, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. And that's in all kind of areas of life. Like, even with like property strategies, people would say, oh no, you can't do that. And I'd think, no, you can. Or I'd think, well, you just don't know how to do it.
Give me an example, because you've done a lot of property strategies. You've not just done one.
Yeah. Let me just think of something. Yeah, I mean, I think like even like title splits. I think someone said to me when I bought property. This is one particular property I bought, but because I owned it, they said, "Oh, you can't do it." So I was like, "Okay, so you're just not the person that knows how to do it." But then I had a chat and spoke to a couple of other people, and you can split titles, but you've got to have like a separate entity. So you have a separate limited company structure, and then the freehold is held in that. But the person told me you can't have it because you can't be the owner of leasehold and freehold at the same time, which is true, correct. But it just meant that I needed to have a limited company, the freehold held in a limited structure. So the two entities are not the same. So that's just one example. But, it was told, no, it's just not possible. And, and I mean, even in the early years, people used to say, oh, because when I started, people, like, buy-to-let was, like, not that popular. People weren't buying properties like how they are now. Like, not everyone, but a lot of people have got an additional property for their, pension or something. But I remember in the early years, like even when I was viewing properties and I was saying to this, agent, oh, I'm going to buy, a few. And he's like, oh, well, you can't really. And he was an estate agent at the time because, you won't get all the mortgages and things. So I usually think that if the majority of the time people saying you can't do it, it's more based on what is in their view, what they think is possible. And there is probably a little bit of, you can't do that, maybe. I don't know, maybe they think you can't do it. Maybe they think they can't do it, so you definitely can't do it. Got no idea.
And you're also known as the short lease queen.
So I like short leases because you can add a lot of value to properties through short leases. And I started off with the leasehold property that I mentioned, and that was not a short lease, but it was also like really undesirable because people don't want leasehold houses. The majority of people that own houses or buy properties are very, meticulous to detail when they're buying a property. How many times do you get a survey report back, you petrol, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with the guttering, I'm not going to buy it. People don't understand, the intricate details of property. So when I bought that, it was because no one wanted it. But I was like, well, it's 996 years. Like, it's going to be like flat on the ground in that time. So it doesn't mean nothing. Peppercorn rent of like, I think it was like £5 a year or something. And that kind of sparked the initial, like, okay, the leasehold, there's something going on here. And then I can't remember who it was he told me, but I used to always chat with the agents. I still talk to a lot of agents now in my sort of patch North London. And I just sort of used to, like, pick their brains and say, oh, what else you got? What's in the drawer? Because it used to be the drawer then. It weren't like Rightmove. I'd be like, that property, what properties have you got been sitting there for a while? And they'd be like, oh, we've got this one, but you don't want this. It's got a short lease. And I'm like, well, what's that mean? Why? Why don't people want it? Oh, because then you've got 60 years on the mortgage. You can't, on the lease, you can't get a mortgage. And I'd be like, oh, okay, all right then. And then I'll go away and talk to my broker. I'd be like, well, it's got 60 years. What does that mean? Can I... And then I started to find out that you could get mortgages. And so I started buying short lease properties. And I did a couple for other people. And then when I separated from my daughter's dad, I had to sell my house because I run into, not financial difficulty, but it was just my income was going to change. So I sold my house, and a flat that I found was a short lease property, and it wasn't that short at the time. It's probably about 76. So I got a mortgage, did the refurb, extended the lease, and added value, and I think that was like the second or third one I done. But then I just started rinsing and repeating and buying.
So for anyone listening, I mean, what's the average you would say in your portfolio that, I mean, you can sort of make, what's the average amount of money you'd make on extending a lease?
Well, with extending the lease, the last couple that I have done, they've been really quite good, because they're, I think there's people say like time in the market or time in the market. I do think there's something to be said about time in the market as well. Not, so I bought during the pandemic. So, it's also about like sort of understanding the sort of people's sentiments at the time, how people were feeling about the market. And I know that everyone was feeling, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? We're going to have a massive dip. So I did buy a property quite cheap. I bought two that were quite cheap, and I managed to sort of almost double their value by extending the lease and doing a refurb. And then the one that I did previous to that, the other two that I did previous to that, one I doubled the value, and the other one I increased it by probably about 35-40%.
And what sort of deposits are you looking at putting down on that? Because this is in London.
2 of them in London, 2 of them in East Sussex. What sort of deposits? What, as in, like 25%?
And how much would that be?
Well, the values were probably, probably about 35-40k, around about that.
And this is, because remember when we had the chat, but this is quite a while back now, and he was like, just put the 25% down, you can get a mortgage, and it's completely blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. There are still other, like, it does limit your lenders that you can go to. But, and also it depends on what you want to do with the property, because some people could just buy it as a buy-to-let, and then you can just, it might not need a refurb, so then you keep it in your portfolio, and then like maybe you wait for 2 years and then you do extend it. There's no, I mean, for me, I've not, I think it's a good way to sort of build a portfolio and then think about how you're gonna, in the future you can extend that if you're gonna have that money to do it, because it's usually costly.